You don't really give a rip, do you? Right? Well, neither do I. Other than I'm going to sit in front of the TV and watch football today, right? But so I love football season. I love to watch football. I don't love it as much as I love March Madness. Come on now. What's your people's problem? March Madness is the best. I got a laugh out of here. That's cool. The kids think I'm funny. All right. And so today we're going to celebrate something even bigger than football. It's even bigger than basketball. It's bigger than anything your teacher could ever tell you or your mom and dad might ever tell you. We're celebrating baptism. Yeah. And I know that in maybe in other churches or maybe in a church that you grew up in one time, it was kind of one of those moments that was very silent and not a whole lot happened. But here we like to see it as the beginning of a party, okay? And so as we get to celebrate baptism today, we're really excited about that. And Ronnie's actually going to read a couple of stories that are connected to our baptisms today.
So this morning at this service, we have Ellington. Ellington Phillips is getting baptized, and she is so excited that she actually made a countdown calendar earlier this week. Nice. Right, Ellington? Right? No. And her mom said that she was pretty sure that if Ellington would have camped out in the parking lot if we would have let her. And basically that she has talked about getting baptized every day this week. But then I also want to read you a story I received from a lady who's getting baptized next service. She writes this: my experience with the church Crosswinds and why I have made the decision to let Jesus take over my life. On September 4, 2022, last Sunday, I was invited to attend the church by my best friend, Kristen. I was a nervous wreck as I had not attended church really since I was a child and would go with my great-grandmother. I have also, for many years, never really let the Lord into my life. I've had a rough upbringing, going through all those things for so many years. I always doubted faith. Kristen could see the pain I felt, especially with my current situation I'm going through, and believed that there was hope for me and that God had a plan for me. I'm very grateful that she spoke to me and gave me the courage to walk through the church's doors. During the service, I had felt that the pastor was speaking to me, like he knew everything I had went through and what I was currently going through. I also felt as though I was being spoken to through all the songs. I caught myself being drawn in and fully focused by every word and lyric sung. I stood up and I sang along word for word while grasping onto Kristen's hand and letting the tears fall down my face. I truly felt at that very moment that God was with me. I felt the relief that I no longer had to go through life alone. I felt like he understood me, my pain and my guilt for all the mistakes I've made. I felt the angry leave my heart, and I became so full of forgiveness and understanding. From that day, that's last Sunday, from that day, I've prayed so much and I felt so much come off my shoulders. I'm ready to allow God to take over my life. I trust his plan for me. I've chosen to get baptized and to give my life completely to God. I'm ready to let go of all my past, all my pain, all my anger. I'm ready to be forgiven for all my mistakes and poor decisions. I'm completely ready and so excited for this new and bright journey. I'm fully ready to be the best version of myself and to share this with others around me. I am so blessed that my friends spoke to me and introduced me to Crosswinds. Accepting God into my life and into my heart is the greatest and best decision I have ever made.
Baptism in itself is not salvation. Baptism is coming to this place where you realize what God has already done in your life. You've already said yes to Jesus. You've already given him your life. And baptism is this outward sign of what God is doing in your heart. And that's what we celebrate with Miss Ellington this morning and those who will be baptized at the second service too. So I'm going to ask Miss Ellington to come on up. I'm going to ask you guys to be seated. The worship team is going to start to lead us in worship. And as we baptize Miss Ellington, Once she's done being baptized, then you guys can stand and you can hoot and you can holler and you can high five and you can hug. Remember, right? When we celebrate a touchdown, we hug people we don't know. So we're going to celebrate with Miss Ellington while the worship team sings.
Spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You have been so, so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down.
When they get baptized, you can cheer and you can high five and you can hug somebody next to you, right? Because we get excited. And then after the last baptism has happened, we want you guys to stand and just worship with us, right? So are you ready to cheer? All right, all right.
I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. You have been so, so kind to me. And oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. And I couldn't earn it, and I don't deserve it. Still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Yeah, yeah. When I was your foe, still There's no wall you won't kick down or lie you won't tear down coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me.
Good morning. So we're not in the book of Psalms. So we finished up the Psalms last week. We actually are, this is a part of our Connect weekend. We had a great number of people who Friday night and Saturday morning came and kind of walked through what we kind of do with people when they're wanting to check out the church, when they're wanting to get to know a little bit more about the church, understand our vision. But you're going to get a little bit more of it this morning as well. But if you haven't been to a Connect weekend, it doesn't give you an excuse not to come. Right?
That's right. That's right.
And so we're going to actually take some time this morning talking a little bit about the vision, talk a little bit about some spiritual formation stuff, and then talk a little bit about the path that we see, hopefully helping people like yourself, that if you don't already understand that, take some steps in what it looks like to be a part of what the church, what God has called His church to do, and then and helping you take steps in being the person and living out the very purpose that God has created you. Because one of the things I said last week as we were studying Psalm 139 was that God's given us a purpose and a calling, and you have not only do you have a purpose and a calling as a follower of Jesus, but you have a responsibility, okay? You have a responsibility. One of the things we don't do here at church is membership. We don't do membership. You're like, why all churches do membership? Well, we don't. And for this reason, because we believe in ownership, right? We believe that when Jesus comes in and He transform your heart and He changes your heart, there's something that you want to obviously do with that, hopefully, as you're growing to understand that. And maybe you're here this morning, you haven't given your life to Christ and you're still trying to figure that out. That's all great and well. And I'm really excited that you're here and believe that God has something for you, much like the girl that we talked about from last week who came in and found Jesus, and that's the very reason why we do what we do.
That's right.
It's for that very reason. And so we want to take a few moments this morning and kind of paint a little bit of a picture. But what am I going to actually do? We're going to paint a little bit of a picture for this discipleship process that hopefully you will be able to find yourself in this path. At some place in this path, you'll be able to find and say, okay, well, this is where I am, but that's not where God wants me to stay. God wants me to go here, and how can I take a step to get there, okay? Because here's the last thing Jesus wants. The last thing Jesus wants is for people to come into his church and just sit there and do nothing for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
And so if I can be as bold to say, and I said this to the group on Friday night, and I may get shot for this, but I'm willing to take that, okay, is that the church doesn't need more people just to come in and sit on Sunday mornings. If that's what you want to do, there are plenty of good churches out there for you to go to. You've probably never heard a pastor say that. I'm just being really honest because as a pastor, as a staff, as a leadership team, we didn't get into this to just go through the motions. To create a service where people come in, oh, I love the music and the pastor, I love his preaching, but I'm not going to do anything with it. I'm not going to do anything with the gospel. I'm not going to do anything with... We don't have time for that. Jesus is coming back. And people are dying and going to hell every single day. And we got to care about that. We got to care about that. Kristen, if you're here this morning, thank you for inviting your friend. Thank you because you were Jesus to her. Now, maybe you might need to be a Kristen to somebody. Mm-hmm. And that might be what you walk out of here with. Because I hope that you have somebody in your life who's not a believer. Don't surround yourself with a bunch of Christians and not have any connection with unbelievers. Because as a church, we are called. If you claim to be a follower of Jesus, okay? If you claim to be a follower of Jesus, if at some point in your life you said yes to Jesus, then you walk into this responsibility that I have something that God has given me and I got to do something with it. You didn't know I was going to start off that way, did you?
Keep going, man.
I didn't either.
Let's go.
So Jesus said, go and make disciples. Okay, at the foundation of this, Jesus said, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And so that became, we didn't have to, as a church, we didn't have to come up with a mission. It was already there, right? Go into all the world, make disciples, and then live out His word. Live out His word. Do the very things that Jesus said for us to do. So let me tell you how we've been attempting to do that and what God's been doing along the way over the course of the last year. Our gathering as a church has grown by upwards of 42% over the last year. It's grown by over 42% over the course of the last year. And that's great, right? But my goal is not just to get people in seats, get your butt in this seat on a Sunday morning. Okay? So I celebrate that because what that does is it's expanding our opportunity for influence and impact into our community.
Yeah.
So that's why I celebrate 42% of growth, which means, if you look around, second service is almost as packed, and we're trying to figure out what are we going to do if we continue to grow. We grew through the summer, and we're not sure what we're going to do with all these people, but we know the calling is to mobilize as many people as we possibly can to impact this community and the world around us for Jesus, and so that's what we're going to do. And so we've grown by 42%. Our children's ministry has gone up like 41% over the last year. And it's more than doubled what the national average is. It's more than doubled what the national average is. Our teenagers has gone up more than 12% over the last year, which again has almost doubled what the national average is. Listen, listen, don't clap for me, okay? I'm not saying this, oh, Pastor Chris, you're a great guy. Your staff is awesome. Yeah, they're great, but this is not about us. This is about what Jesus is doing. And so we're seeing people. Just get this. Our giving has gone up by 40%. You're like, well, that means I don't have to give. No. No. Do you realize that we just came out of a pandemic and they've been talking about recession and we've seen our giving go up? Thank you. If you give to the church, thank you. I hope that why you give is because you see the heart of the mission that we feel called to, and that's why you give. Okay? That's why you give, is because, fortunately and hopefully, that you believe that we steward the money well and we're doing everything we possibly can to further the mission of Jesus, okay? If you don't give this morning, I realize that sometimes it takes people getting into a church, because if we've grown by 40-some%, you probably need some time to say, hey, can I trust him? I totally get it. But I believe it's a part of your discipleship process that at some point in your life, you have to take a step financially to trust the Lord with your finances, okay? And if you don't trust me, I say this quite frequently, then go give it somewhere else. I don't want you to do that. But if you don't trust me, I just want, because I believe that God, he doesn't want something from you. He has something for you. And that doesn't mean, oh, well, if I give $300 today, then God's going to replace it next week. No, maybe. But let's be honest. I didn't know I was going to do a giving talk. All right. Up 40%. Small groups. We started with 9 groups in December, and we have 21 now. We have 148. We have 148 adults, and if you were to include the teenagers, we have 31% of our attendance is actually in small groups of that 148 people. And if you were to include the teens who also do small groups on Sunday night and Wednesday night, we actually have 52% of our people in small groups. So how awesome is that? Because what happens in small group is discipleship happens in small group. Spiritual growth happens in small group. Relationships happen in small group. Okay, you can really find a place. We hope that you find a place to belong, right? And then, get this. The number of people who are serving in some form or capacity, including students and adults, is 235 people serving in Crosswind Church, which is 50% of our attendance. How awesome is that? Thank you for those who served. It is awesome because even yesterday we were able to go into our community at Founders Day and serve. For those of you who served, thank you very much. They were serving in the rain. I saw a couple of them jumping in puddles. Tracy Geyer. Oh, sorry. Hey, Tracy. Okay. Over the course of the last year, $2,500 raised by our teens for World Vision in a 30-hour famine. Over 900 boxes packed by our people for Operation Christmas Child. We're shooting for 2,000 next year. This year, 2,000. Let me say it again, 2,000 this year. Let me say it again, 2,000. Where's Amy? Amy's not in here. She's going, 2,000? 2,000. We're going to blow Brunswick County out with Christmas boxes. Those go overseas and impact multiple families and take the gospel in places that we're not able to physically go right now. We gave $3,421.58 to the Lifeline Pregnancy Center through our bottles this past year. I think that's almost triple what we've normally been doing. 105 beds were given out this past year through Bed Connect. We were able to help a child have a bed to sleep in. Thank you to those couples who have been serving in that capacity. 2,380 cans of food were collected for Manna Ministry. We typically do that around Super Bowl, right there around the February time frame, and how incredible that was. But God did something else too. God did something else. There was a church here locally named Grace Point Community Church. And through the pandemic, they ended up having to close their doors. And many of them, a few of them have come here since. And we love having them as a part of our fellowship, as a part of our community. Through that, they saw the mission and the impact that Crosswinds was able to have and was having, and they have since gifted Crosswinds Church $100,000. I say that with great humility and great thanks, because we believe that God's doing something here that we never imagined. Ephesians 3, verses 20 through 21 is really a foundation for what we started this church on. And it says, now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we could ask or imagine, according to his power that's at work within us. To him be glory in the church and in Christ Jesus through all generations forever and ever. Amen. And that was foundational for us when we started this church. That was the first verse that God gave me when we decided that we were moving to Wilmington to start a church. And so this morning we want to talk a little bit about this pathway that we believe that God's calling us to. And talk a little bit about that. There's 3 circle pieces. There are 3 parts of our lives that we believe play into being a disciple of Christ, to being a person of influence, to being what Jesus called us to be. And the first one is this: is spiritual formation, spiritual foundation. It's this kind of this head knowledge, right? Because at some point you have to begin to interact your head into this whole, and your knowledge into this whole relationship with Jesus. And hopefully by deepening our understanding of God, by getting into His Word, by putting ourselves in places where we can grow in our understanding and our knowledge of the Word, then our spiritual foundation begins to grow. And here's what I believe about that. Because at some point in your life, you're going to be confronted with a crisis of belief. You're going to come to some point in your life where you've got to decide what you believe and what you don't believe. And it may be sometimes thrust on you by situations that you didn't see coming. It might be a cancer situation, or it might be a family situation, or it may be something else that brings you to this place where you have to begin to discern what am I going to do with this? And let's be really honest, as I talked with last week, is that there's a time coming, and I believe we're not far away, that there's being a line drawn in the sand, this spiritual civil war that's where the line's being drawn, and we have to decide what's going to be the foundation that we're going to stand on. Because you will be challenged. And at that moment, you have to know in your head what it is that you believe and what you're going to stand on. Because if you don't, then most likely what you'll do is you'll just do what everybody else is doing. And so we have to have a spiritual foundation. It's almost like we revert back to our teen years. Because it's really easy in our teen years to get caught up in just doing whatever the crowd does. And probably the reality of it is the majority of us here understand what that means. There are probably a few here that probably took a stand, but the majority of teenagers that I dealt with for 12 years, they always, most of the time, wanted to follow the crowd. And so even as adults, sometimes if we're not careful, we have to understand. That's why you can't just rely on my preaching to give you a foundation for the Word. And so my question would be to you, as a part of the spiritual foundation, do you read the Bible? Are you studying the Bible? And then you're like, well, Pastor Chris, I don't know how to do that. Then that's what we're here for, to help you begin to understand how to read and know the Bible and understand the Bible. Second one is transformational living. So God does something in our head, and now he begins to do something in our heart. He begins to transform us into what he wants. Sometimes God starts with the heart. If you're like me, you're an emotional person, God started with my heart because I wasn't smart enough. And then he began to work in my head. Some people, you're way too smart, and he starts in your head. And so he starts with your head because we haven't found your heart yet. Sorry. Sometimes things just come out. I'm just kidding. Everybody's got a heart. No Tin Man in here, right? Or wait, Scarecrow. Which one was it? Tin Man. Tin Man. You all got hearts, okay? Just sometimes you don't tap into them, all right? That's a better way of saying it. So it's transformational living. So my question is, if you're reading and studying, then what's God doing in you, right? How are you growing? How is God changing you? How is God changing you? How are you different today than you were yesterday, or a week ago, or a year ago, or 5 years ago? Or would you sit here and say, well, Pastor Chris, I've been going here for 10 years, but I haven't changed. Then I got a problem. And we need to have a very long conversation. Because it can be easy to go into a church and sit for a very long time and never allow God to change us. I hate to say that. We can be resistant if we're not careful. But this transformational living, how am I growing and how am I changing and what is God doing in me? Because I believe as we grow in our head knowledge, then what happens in our heart, that when that line is drawn in the sand, then we're willing to stand up and be more bold about it. Because God's changed our heart. And then there's missional engagement. God didn't call us to only grow in our understanding, our knowledge of him and the Bible and his word. He didn't call us only to be transformed, our lives to be transformed where we do things differently, but to engage in the mission that he's given us. And so the question becomes, how are you using your gifts and your abilities that God has given you to impact the world around you? When was the last time you had a spiritual conversation with someone? Let me say that again. When was the last time you had a spiritual conversation with someone? When was the last time you shared your faith? It's this missional engagement. It's saying, I'm recognizing what God's, because when God changes your heart, you have no other option but to do something with it. Say that again. When God changes your heart, you have no other option but to do something with it. It's kind of like, listen, it's kind of like dating. You're like, that's a really weird analogy. It's kind of like dating, right? Listen, when I met my wife and decided that I was interested in her more than just a friend, I was willing to do whatever I could to be with her. Because what was happening in my heart is my heart was being transformed to the point that I was willing to lose sleep. I was willing to stay up till 3 a.m. on the phone and talk to her. I was willing to take every few pennies I had and run to the convenience store and buy a $1 rose because that's all I had. And do something for her, because when God begins to transform your heart, if you've had a kid, when that baby came out, man, your heart just changed. And all of a sudden, it begins to make you do things that you never thought you'd do, like change diapers. And so there's this transformation that happens in us when we allow God to do something in us, that all of a sudden we're like, I've got to take what God's given me and I got to make a difference to the world around me. And so I'm challenging you this morning. Where are you at in your walk with Jesus? If you're here and you don't know where you're at in your walk with Jesus, then let's start to figure out. This is a great place to explore it. It's a great place to come and try and figure it out. Because we're all messed up human beings. We're imperfect people running after a perfect God. And so let's do everything we possibly can. Sorry, Ronnie, I took up all your time. Ronnie, go.
So we see these three different circles, the spiritual foundations, the transformational living, and the missional engagement, as all being intersecting. We need, in order to be a healthy disciple, a healthy follower of Christ, we need all three of those pieces working in tandem together, or else we become lopsided. And one of the things that we've been able to identify is that there are certain stages, there are certain phases, there's this path that we typically take as disciples of Christ. And you actually should have received a handout that looks like this, and we're going to look at a couple of those phases. The first one is called exploring, and what we realize is these are not destinations. These are not stops so much as they are a time period, a phase that people typically walk through in their discipleship journey with Jesus. And the first one is what we call exploring. This is the phase where you're asking questions, where you're asking those questions of, what do I believe? What do I do when a crisis hits? When you're asking your friend who's walking through something awful and they have peace, and you say to your friend, how do you have peace in that situation? So those who are in the exploring stage, they may be antagonistic to the gospel, or they may be sensitive to the gospel and open to it. But regardless of it, they are actually just exploring. They're like the person who I read the story about this morning. She was just exploring. Hey, my life's a wreck, but my friend said, come to church. I'll explore it, okay? And so that's what we typically see in those who are in that. What we then see is that as we come out of exploring is that you begin to connect by attending. You attend church, and you come in and you sit, you participate, and then you leave. A lot of times, those who are in the attending phase, there's a little bit less connection as far as sometimes they come in late, and then you first one's out the door, sort of thing. You might have a couple of people that you say hey to, but it doesn't go any further than that. Those who are attending, the participation, like I said, is usually limited, but in order to move into the next phase where we begin to use all three of these circles that Pastor Chris talked about, is that you're going to have to start making connections. And so the third phase is this connecting phase. This is the phase where I begin to connect deeper with God, deeper with others, and deeper to the mission of making disciples. This is when you move to the point where you actually come a little bit early and stay a little bit late, where you actually have a little conversation with the people that you tend to sit with, because most of you sit in the same general vicinity every single week. And so you can begin to connect with the people that you generally sit with, and you go a little bit further than just saying hey, to saying, hey, how was your week? What was something good that happened this week? And those sorts of things. You begin to get to know that you might start connecting into a life group, or you might start connecting into a ministry team. Those are important steps to help us to grow in our hearts and in our heads, but also in our ability to serve others. One of the things that when you walked in this morning, you saw the tables in the lobby. This is a great Sunday for you to begin to take a next step. We're going to have our ministry team leaders out there during the break between the two services. You can go talk to some of our ministry team leaders and say, hey, what is this ministry about, and how can I get plugged in? And then the fourth phase that we see is this one called engaging. And this is the phase where I actively participate in the growing of my own faith, and then also in the faith of others. So this goes beyond just sort of kind of come into a life group or serving once in a while on a ministry team, but it's actively involved in engaging in pursuing the growth of my own personal faith and serving others, and engaging in the mission, engaging in tithing, and engaging in participating in a life group, in serving outside of these four walls or in the four walls. And then Beyond that, there are actually two other ones, and the next one is the discipling, where I take the responsibility not just of helping my faith to grow, but I take the responsibility of helping somebody else's faith to grow. And then from there, we see actually multiplying, where I am discipling others who are discipling others who are discipling others. And that's where we get exponential multiplication throughout the kingdom of God. And so what we wanted to do is just bring this to you to say, part of this morning is asking the question, where, just as Pastor Chris said, am I reading my Bible? Am I participating? Those sorts of things. Here's the questions that I want to ask out of this is, where are you? In those 4 sections that are on that piece of paper, where are you? Are you exploring? Are you attending? Are you connecting? Or are you engaging? And then the next question is this: where is God calling you to go? Because like Pastor Chris said, it's not okay just to be like, well, I'm attending, I'm good. I'm just going to sit here, I'm going to hang out in this phase. No, because God has so much more. There's so many people who do not know Jesus Christ, who do not know the hope of salvation, and who will spend eternity in hell, and we have work to do. And so it's not okay to just sit. And so the question is, where is God calling me to come? And now we don't expect you to go straight from attending into discipling. That's unrealistic. But what we do ask is, what is the next step that God is calling you to? And so your next step might be something, and so the final question I have is, what step can you take today that will help you move in that right direction that God's calling you to? It might be salvation. Today may be the day that you say that I'm going to move from exploring Jesus to actually believing in what he did on the cross to forgive me of my sins. Maybe today you make a decision like Ellington, and like the 5 people are getting baptized next service and the 1 girl who's getting baptized after second service. Maybe you make a decision today to say, hey, I believe in Jesus Christ, but I need to take my faith public. And we would love to help you do that. Maybe your decision is to plug into a life group. And so make a decision today to plug into a life group who will help you to grow and where you can help others to grow. Our life group facilitator, Sarah, she'll actually be out at one of the tables. And you can go talk to her about maybe launching your own life group, or maybe participating in one of our life groups that are already existing, or we're actually launching 2 to 4 life groups this fall. And then finally, maybe, actually I got 2 more. Maybe today you're like, you know what, I've been here. I understand the mission. And I want to be part of the team, part of that 50% of those who call Crosslands home who are actively serving in some capacity. Again, our ministry team leaders will be out there. They love to talk with you and get you plugged in. And then finally, maybe as part of your engaging in the mission to make disciples is that you begin to invest by giving in a way that you haven't before, because it all boils down to the fact that we have been called to go into the world, to make disciples, and to live out his word. And you have a major part in that.
Awesome. I know that we're running over. So, Michael, you guys come on out. I'm going to ask you for just a moment to dream with me for just a moment. In a couple of weeks, on October the 9th, next week we actually start a series on Elijah out of 1 Kings chapter 17, 18, 19, all the way to 2 Kings chapter 2, I believe, 1 or 2. We're going to study the book of Elijah, and for about 10 weeks we're going to go through the story of Elijah. Okay? And on October the 9th, I'm actually going to do a vision talk. And I want you to dream with me for just a minute and begin to pray. What if God wanted to use us to reach 10,000 people? I'm not saying build a building that seats 10,000. I have no interest in that. But what if over the course of the next 10 years, a relatively small church, let's be honest, we're a relatively small church. You're like, no, you're not. We really are. But what if God wanted to use a small church to impact and influence and reach 10,000 people over the course of the next 10 years. Now, to be honest with you, I don't know if Jesus is going to wait that long. Which, if he doesn't wait that long, that puts even more responsibility and intentionality on us. Our staff has a dream session on October the 3rd and 4th or 4th and 5th. I don't remember exactly what they are. But we're going to dream about what the next 10 years look like as far as the life of this church. And what does that mean for us? What does God want to do with us? And I hope what you'll do is you'll come along on that journey and say, what does God want to do with me? How awesome would it be 10 years from now to look back and be able to name some of those people that God used for you to influence? Brunswick County, Leland, North Carolina. We have influence through our shoe boxes, right? We send shoe boxes and we're impacting lives through shoe boxes. We help out Manna Ministries and we're able to help families through Manna Ministries. We connected to Brunswick Family Assistance and we're able to serve families through Brunswick Family Assistance. We're able to go out on Founders Day and serve families in Leland. We provide resources to the Congo through World Vision that are helping kids be able to go to school and have clothes and have food and work the impact. And how awesome would it be for us to be able to stand in front of Jesus and him say, well done, good and faithful servant. So will you consider, where are you at? What's your next step? Say, hey, I want to be a part of what Jesus is doing. I want my life, for however long he gives me, I want to make a difference. I don't want to just take advantage of his salvation and his death on the cross. He died on the cross for a purpose and for a reason. And that should change us so much that we're willing to say, Jesus, I'll do whatever. Jesus told his disciples, listen. Jesus told his disciples, unless you deny yourself and take up your cross, that's when you're going to follow me. You must be willing to lose your life so that you can gain it. And so I believe that maybe God has us in a process of growing because what he wants to do over the course of however long he tarries before he comes back, he's still got work for his church to do. And so I say, let's get after it. Let's run after it the next 10 years and see what God just wants to do. Will you stand? We're going to sing a song, Place of Freedom. We believe that God wants to do something in you, that he is doing something in you. And so you use this time just to pray and seek the face of God.